So I'm standing up here on Old Burial Hill beside a really significant stone. It reads Agnes Negro 1714. Agnes, whose name was not Agnes Negro, all we know about her is Agnes, and that she was a person of color and was also an enslaved person, has this and two other documents to prove her existence. That's it. But that's also more than a lot of people in her position have left behind in terms of a legacy of a record. But nevertheless, they were present, and we want to make sure not to have erasure take their part in history and part and identity as part of what makes up Marblehead away from us. This stone, number one. Number two, the other thing that we have from her is something we found in Essex probate court, actually. It was a document that proves that she was enslaved. She was handed down from father to son in a family out here. And that was significant for a number of reasons. Number one, not only is she enslaved, but number two, she was a female servant, and she served the ladies of the household. What that work involved, we don't really know. If it was cooking and cleaning, if it was sewing, if it was something more physical, could be. But women didn't own things in the time that Agnes was around. So the deed transferred from the male heir. The last document was, for me, the most fun to find. I'm a pastor here in town. One of my colleagues, Andy, over at St. Michael's Church, Reverend Andy, invited me over one day. And beautiful St. Michael's Church, I went down into their basement, into this meticulously kept records room. And there in a dusty old book, all the way back from more than 200 years ago, was a handwritten inscribed note that recorded that Agnes was baptized. And so two of those documents are significant departures from the way that people of color were traditionally treated in the institution of slavery. The one is that she was baptized. And in fact, the family that owned her may have even switched churches until they found one that would do that, which is a really incredible testimony to compassion, as is her spot here. A spot of immense honor and beauty. She was actually buried with the family. And that stands sadly in stark contrast to where many of the bodies of enslaved people ended up unceremoniously. And she, on the other hand, receives this stone. History is complicated. It can involve both the honoring and the extreme evil of the institution of slavery. It's something we have to reckon with as a people. But nevertheless, it's something that it does us no good to turn away from. Instead, if we're going to embrace the legacy of this header, of this person who was foundational to our town, of Marblehead, we need to really restore this stone to what it ought to be. Because I told you this was one of the documents that was left over from her, but unfortunately, Agnes Negro 1714, only one word on there is correct, and it's the word Agnes. The original stone went missing, and so this is what we're left with, this restored stone. It would have originally read that she was a servant and of the man and his family, and a different date even. So this entire stone, the way it looks, is part of a project that we're working on to restore it to historical accuracy, to restore it and provide some context for people about the fact that this was a woman who lived, worked, and died here, and is part of the legacy of this town.
What we do know about the enslaved person Agnes is that she was born in the 1600s. We don't know exactly where, but she obviously was in Marblehead around the turn of the 1700s, and as was mentioned, was baptized as an adult in her early 40s. And she lived until age 43, which probably was about an average age in that era. So her date of death was in 1718. A number of families in Marblehead held enslaved people in the 1600s and the 1700s, going all the way till the state of Massachusetts court system said that slavery was not compatible with a new constitution that Massachusetts adopted in 1780. So a number of families in Marblehead held enslaved people. A number of people who are pretty prominent were holding enslaved people. And the burial spots of those people was very different from what occurred with Agnes. There was the typical way of burying people who were enslaved, which was to put them in unmarked, put their bodies in unmarked spots without any recognition. And there are two places that are known to have a number of burials in this regard, and they actually had labels that townspeople gave to them as Negro burying places. One is off Washington and Rockaway Streets near the Lee Mansion, and precisely visible from the rear of the parking lot of the Masonic building. You can see in a thicket there that there are bodies buried under there. And the second place that is the known Negro burying place is near what was eventually called the alms house, the poor house, in the vicinity of Elm Street and Pond Street, near the historic structure that we know of as the gun house. So those are places that Marblehead Racial Justice Team cares about and wants to try to increase people's just grasp that there were a number of enslaved people sufficient to have spots that kept being known as Negro burying spaces. So these were enough people that it is something we need to care about and hopefully have some respect for the human beings who are interred there.
My connection with Agnes actually started many years ago when I first moved. My family and I moved to just across the street from where Old Burial Hill is. And this was back in 67, 68. And I have two grown children now, and they spent a lot of time playing on this hill among the stones of hide and seek and so forth. And over the years, of course, we were very interested in this, and it was and continues to be a very popular visiting spot in town. Many people come here, walk up the hill, and walk around to see the stones. But in the, I'd say the 70s and a little past that even, there was a lot of vandalism up here. I don't know if people thought they could make a lot of money by stealing stones or what, but many of them, frankly, went missing or just were broken and pushed off their pedestals. Where we are now, from our research, it looks like Agnes, as you've heard here in the talk about her, that she was actually buried here with the family that she served. And then over the years, again, those stones have disappeared, and we are researching to reestablish exactly what they were and what they said, and in particular, in these past few years, the background for Agnes herself. And part of that, I think, is because in our Marblehead Racial Justice Team that we are a part of, we'd like to see the people in Marblehead, people of color who lived here, to give them more prominence and to establish what their history was and to make it present right here on top of Old Burial Hill among some other places in town. And so we're grateful for at least this little tiny one right here, but really trying to explore the history so that we can develop a plan to go forward to hopefully have a new gravestone that would recognize her, and even throughout the town, to bring together those places that have some connection with people like Agnes, who are not recognized hardly at all in this period. So I'm grateful to be able to be a part of that and to help this move forward, and we're grateful for the help here to make it more apparent in the community and move forward. So thank you for doing this, and look like we're moving ahead, and that's good.